A thunderous silence swallowed the last remnants of Earth's fading heartbeat, as if the planet itself was holding its breath before the final fall. The sky was a sickly bruise of ash-gray clouds, stretching endlessly, choking the sun's last golden rays until they were nothing but pale ghosts on the horizon. Below, cracked earth yawned open in jagged scars, bleeding dust and despair into the wind. No birds sang, no rivers flowed. The city as a once vibrant hubs of life and hope were now ruins, skeletal monuments to a civilization unraveling at the seams. Far above, the cold void of space held its watchful gaze. The last human governments, those fragile bastions of order, had collapsed like dominoes under the relentless assault of alien fleets that had circled the solar system with merciless intent. The galaxy's most powerful empires, who once whispered behind closed doors about Earth's primitive defiance, now gloated openly. They believed the extinction of humanity was sealed, a closed chapter in the cosmic history book. Their warships gleamed under distant stars, weapons primed to extinguish any flicker of resistance. They had declared victory, but victory was an illusion. Inside the ruins, a chill wind stirred the ashes, carrying with it the faintest trace of something not quite dead, a breath, a pulse, a memory. The air trembled with the weight of lost dreams and broken promises. Humanity's last hope was not in its armies or its leaders, for those had crumbled. It lay hidden in shadows, in silence, in the spaces where the light no longer reached. On a barren ridge overlooking a shattered valley, a figure stood alone. She was draped not in armor or regalia but in the remnants of a world that had forgotten her. Her eyes, deep wells of pain and fire, scanned the horizon as if searching for a signal, anything that could ignite the embers of rebellion smoldering in her chest. Around her, the dust swirled like ghosts, whispering of battles fought and lost, of futures stolen. She was not a soldier, not a queen, not a savior clad in shining armor. She was something far more dangerous, an unyielding spirit forged in the crucible of despair, the last living echo of humanity's resilience. The galaxy believed she was gone, a casualty of the war that had ravaged the stars, but she was waiting, watching, breathing life into the silence before the storm. The collapse had begun in 1,000 small fractious alliances broken, fleets decimated, morale shattered, each loss a quiet death, unnoticed amid the roar of conquest. Families torn apart, homes reduced to dust, history erased by fire and steel. The collective soul of humanity fractured under pressure, but never shattered completely. Every ruined city was a tombstone, every fallen comrade a whispered vow that the fight was not over. As night fell, the stars seemed colder, more distant, yet in the darkness, a solitary light flickered, a beacon of stubborn hope. It was fragile, barely perceptible, but it pulsed with the steady rhythm, like a heartbeat defying the silence. This was not the story of generals or kings. It was the story of the forgotten, the broken, the few who refused to bow. And at its center was here the last hope of mankind. But even as the galaxy settled into complacency, unaware of the storm gathering on that desolate ridge, the first sparks of resistance began to kindle. The collapse was only the prelude. What came next would shake the very foundations of the cosmos. The breath before the storm was short, but it carried the weight of 1,000 worlds. And in that quiet moment, humanity's fate hung in the balance, not as a conquered species, but as a force rising from the ashes, silent, unstoppable, and eternal. The planet lay forgotten in the vastness of space, a barren rock swallowed by shadows and dust, far from the bustling stars and the roaring wars that defined the galaxy's heart. Its surface was cracked and lifeless, scorched by years of neglect and cosmic fury. No wind sang, no rivers ran, only silence, thick and suffocating, blanketing the ruins of a world that time seemed to have abandoned. Amid the rubble, ancient machines lay half buried in sand, relics of battles long past, their cold metal shells scarred by relentless fire and rust. In this forsaken place, the faintest whisper of movement stirred the stillness. Beneath a shattered canopy of twisted metal and broken stone, a figure lay hidden, a shadow of what once was, a memory breathing in the darkness. The woman's chest rose and fell, shallow breaths echoing in the hollow cavern where she had been buried, forgotten by both friend and foe. Years had passed since she fell, years in which the galaxy had marked her as dead, erased her name from records, and assumed her spirit broken. But she was not gone. Her eyelids fluttered open slowly, revealing eyes that gleamed with the fire of 1,000 battles fought and lost. They held no fear, only fierce determination. A storm barely contained beneath a calm surface. The cold air filled her lungs, sharp and bitter like the taste of ash. As she pushed herself upward, muscles aching but refusing to yield, every inch of her body told a story. Scars that mapped the war she had survived, skin weathered by uncountable suns, and a spirit tempered in the furnace of relentless suffering. Around her, the planet groaned at a low, mournful sound that echoed like a warning across the barren plains. Above, dark clouds churned, casting twisted shadows that danced over the jagged horizon. The twin suns dipped low, their dying light bleeding through the thick atmosphere, casting the landscape in an eerie crimson glow. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay, yet beneath it all lay a pulsing fragile ember of life refusing to be extinguished. She rose unsteadily, her gaze sweeping the horizon where the alien fleets prowled like predators, convinced the hunt was over. Their drones buzzed overhead, mechanical eyes scanning the surface for any sign of resistance. They believed the planet silent, its last defenders crushed beneath the weight of conquest. They did not know that beneath their feet, the heartbeat of humanity still thrummed, quiet but unbroken. In that moment, she was no longer just a fallen warrior, she was the embodiment of survival itself. Her breath steadied, every movement deliberate, as if the very act of standing was a defiance against fate. Memories flooded her, the screams of comrades lost in the firestorm, the bitter taste of betrayal, the weight of countless lives resting on shoulders too weary to bear them. But alongside the pain burned a relentless flame, a vow to rise again, to fight back when the galaxy least expected it. Around her, the runes whispered secrets of old alliances shattered, dreams buried beneath rubble, and hopes suspended in a fragile web of time. The planet was a graveyard, but also a cradle, a place where endings blurred into beginnings. She stepped forward, each footfall echoing against the hollow silence, a drumbeat heralding a new chapter. Her fingers brushed against the remnants of a broken insignia, once a symbol of pride, now a reminder of what was lost. Yet, within her eyes shone something no conqueror could steal. The indomitable spirit of a people who refused to disappear. Far beyond the horizon, the alien commanders met in their cold halls, unaware that the ghost they had buried was waking. Their triumph was premature, their victory incomplete, because the Forgotten One was no longer just a name whispered in fear. She was the spark that would ignite a revolution, the shadow that would cast doubt across their empires, the silent storm gathering strength beneath the dust. And as the sun set behind the jagged peaks, she raised her gaze to the stars, silent, unyielding, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. The galaxy thought she was lost, but she was just beginning. The weight of countless shattered hopes pressed down on the ragged remnants of humanity's survivors as they gathered in the cold shadows of a crumbling fortress. They looked to her not as a queen crowned with jewels, nor as a soldier clad in armor, but as the final ember of a dying flame, the fragile thread holding their scattered spirits together. Yet when the murmurs rose, offering her the throne, a mantle of leadership heavy with expectation, she stood silent, the burden too great, the past too raw. "I am not a soldier," she said, voice low but steady, cutting through the desperate whispers like a blade. "I am not a queen." Her eyes, fierce and unyielding, scanned the weary faces before her. "I am simply the last one left standing." In that refusal lay a quiet defiance, a statement that echoed deeper than any battle cry. She would not wear their titles or their crowns, for those were relics of a world already broken. Instead, she carried something far more powerful, the unspoken promise of survival, the unyielding will to keep fighting when all seemed lost. Around her, the fractured group found a strange comfort in her words, a beacon that did not command but inspired. Without armies, without flags, they were fragments of a forgotten past. Yet together they began to weave a new story, not one of conquest or glory, but of endurance. The air was thick with the scent of dust and sweat, shadows flickering against the cracked walls as flickering lights struggled to hold back the encroaching darkness. Outside, distant explosions rattled the ground, a grim reminder that the enemy's shadows stretched far and wide. But inside, Beneath the weight of despair, something new was stirring. She walked among them, not as a ruler, but as one of them. Each step carried the weight of years lived and battles survived. Her silence spoke volumes, a language older than words. She bore their pain, their fears, their hopes, and in return, they saw not a leader to obey, but a fellow soul to follow. The galaxy outside saw humanity as broken, defeated. They counted on that assumption. But within these shattered walls, a new kind of strength took root, not forged in the heat of battle, but in the quiet resilience of those who refused to surrender. She was no queen to be crowned. She was the heartbeat of a people who would not be silenced. And as the enemy's fleets closed in, the real fight was just beginning. The night sky hung heavy and still, an endless black canvas pierced only by the faint shimmer of distant stars. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the planet itself held its breath, waiting for the moment to erupt into chaos. She stood alone on the jagged ridge, a solitary figure framed by the ghostly light of a dying world. Around her, the ruins whispered forgotten tales as echoes of battles long past, dreams shattered like glass beneath the crushing weight of conquest. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, scanned the horizon where enemy drones moved like a deadly swarm, their metallic bodies gleaming coldly against the night. No trumpet sounded. No war cry broke the silence. The assault came silently, a calculated storm of steel and circuitry, designed to crush hope before it could spark. But she was ready. In the depths of her soul burned a fire untouched by defeat. Her hands moved with purpose, weaving invisible patterns through the air, commands born not of technology alone, but of instinct and will forged in the harshest crucibles of survival. The ancient systems, relics of humanity's lost ingenuity, responded to her touch as if awakened from a long slumber. One by one, drones faltered, systems glitching, engines stuttering, formations breaking apart like fragile glass. They plummeted to the ground in cascades of sparks and fire, silent explosions lighting the darkness like stars being born in reverse. The first salvo of resistance had been unleashed, not with guns or armies, but with the quiet power of a lone defiant soul. Watching from the shadows, scattered survivors felt a surge of hope ignite within their hearts. The impossible had happened. The woman they thought lost had struck back, the ghost in the enemy's machine. Far away, the alien commanders stared at their screens, disbelief etched deep in their faces. The war, they had assumed, was over. But this strike shattered their certainty. The last hope of mankind was not extinguished. It was fighting back, fierce and silent, ready to turn the tide. She was no soldier in uniform, no queen adorned with crowns. She was something far more terrifying to those who sought to crush humanity, the embodiment of relentless spirit, the spark that could ignite a revolution. The night air pulsed with the promise of war renewed. The first resistance fire had been lit. The vastness of space had long been the silent witness to countless battles, but none so cold and calculated as the one that now unfolded around Earth's shattered remains. For years, the alien empires had watched from afar, confident in their victory, their fleets encircling the blue planet like vultures waiting to feast on the carcass of a fallen species. They believed humanity was broken, erased from the cosmic map, a fated myth whispered in fear and contempt. Yet, the universe was about to learn a brutal truth. When the Forgotten One re-emerged from the shadows of the wasteland, it sent ripples through the enemy's ranks, the ripples that quickly turned into waves of dread. Commanders in their cold, metallic halls had dismissed her as a casualty, a relic of a war already won. But now, with stealth and precision, she challenged their arrogance. Her return was a wound reopening, a dark shadow cast over their glittering thrones. The alien fleet scrambled, dispatching patrols and hunters, desperate to locate and eliminate the source of this defiance. But the Forgotten One was no ordinary target. She moved with the silence of a ghost, unseen and unpredictable. Where they expected chaos, she brought calm. Where they anticipated weakness, she revealed iron resolve. Their first realization came too late. A fleet that had grown complacent, distracted by celebrations of conquest, was blindsided. Drones that had once swept entire planets with ease faltered under her assault. She disrupted communications, sabotaged command signals, and turned their own technology against them. The enemy's carefully constructed empire began to crack, its foundations trembling. Yet, It was not brute force alone that made her dangerous. It was the message she carried, a message etched deep into the minds of every alien overlord who had thought humanity defeated. She wasn't erased. That truth unsettled them more than any weapon. It was a reminder that the war was far from over, that beneath the ashes of defeat lay a fire waiting to roar back to life. The reign, once certain, was now shadowed by fear. And as the stars blinked coldly overhead, the galaxy held its breath, watching a silent battle unfold, a battle where the return of one forgotten warrior threatened to rewrite destiny itself. The war room was a cavernous, dimly lit space, carved out of the bones of a once great fortress that had seen better days, the walls scarred by explosions, flickering lights casting long shadows across tired faces. The air was thick with a mix of sweat, dust, and the faint hum of distant machinery, a constant reminder that the enemy's reach was never far away. Around the cracked stone table stood the last remnants of humanity's resistance, as soldiers hardened by countless battles, leaders weighed down by impossible decisions, and survivors clinging to the thin thread of hope that still fluttered within their battered hearts. They looked to Hera not as a warrior clad in shining armor, nor as a queen crowned with laurels, but as something altogether different. She was the embodiment of a truth too painful to ignore, a living testament to the cost of endless war. And as the murmurs swelled, they offered her a title she never sought: leader, commander, hope incarnate. But when the words were spoken, she did not rise to claim them. Instead, she remained still, a statue carved from sorrow and strength. The question came, jagged and sharp: are you here to win? A silence fell like a heavy curtain, pressing in on everyone in the room. The question echoed in the hollow spaces of their souls. Were they here to win, or merely to survive the devastation that had shattered their world? Her gaze was steady, piercing through the haze of despair. She did not smile, nor did she offer the empty promises of victory that had been whispered too many times before. Instead, she spoke slowly, each word a hammer blow against the walls of false hope. No, she said, voice low and unwavering. I am not here to win. Gasps flickered among the crowd, shock crippling through their ranks. Not to win? Then why fight? What was left if not victory? She lifted her head, eyes burning with a fire born of endless loss. I am here to make you feel the weight of your defeat. Her words hung in the air, heavy and sharp as broken glass. She did not speak of glory or conquest, but of something raw and real: pain, loss, and the bitter taste of surrender. Not just to lose battles, she continued, but to know lost self at its sting, its finality. To remind us all what it means to be broken, so that we might learn what it takes to rise again. Around her, the room shifted, a breath caught between hope and despair. She spoke not of illusions, but of truth. The truth that war was not won in a day, nor by a single battle, but forged in the crucible of shattered dreams and relentless perseverance. Outside, distant explosions punctuated the night, flares of fire lighting the sky like morbid stars. The enemy pressed closer every day, their shadow darkening the land. Yet within this chamber of quiet defiance, a new kind of battle was being waged, not of weapons and tactics, but of spirit and will. She stepped forward then, the weight of countless fallen comrades pressing on her shoulders. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried the force of a thunderclap. Victory is a mirage we chase when we have forgotten what it means to endure. I fight so that no one here will forget. Her eyes scanned the faces before her, faces etched with fear, fatigue, and faint sparks of hope. We fight not because we believe the war will end tomorrow, but because we refuse to let it end with us forgotten. The room was silent, each heart pounding in rhythm with the truth she laid bare. This was not a fight for triumph, but a fight to be remembered, to be counted, to survive the storm that threatened to swallow them whole. She moved among them then, not as a leader demanding obedience, but as a survivor bearing witness to their shared pain. There will be no easy victories, no shining banners waving over conquered lands, only the slow, grinding resilience of those who refuse to bow. A soldier's hand clenched a worn rifle tighter, eyes gleaming with renewed resolve. Another wiped a tear from a cheek hardened by grief. They understood now the war was no longer about winning, but about never surrendering. Her gaze turned outward, toward the distant horizon where the enemy's fires burn bright. They believe this war will break us, but they do not know what it means to carry the weight of billions in your eyes, to walk through fire and emerge still standing. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle like dust in the air. I do not fight for victory. I fight to remind us all that even in defeat, we are not broken beyond repair. The room breathed together, a collective inhale of pain and hope intertwined. The enemy's shadow loomed, but so did the flicker of an unyielding flame, a flame she carried within her. And in that moment, the real war began, and not on distant battlefields, but within the hearts of those who refused to let darkness claim them. The fight was no longer for winning, it was for surviving, for living, for rising. In the vast cold of space, beyond the shattered remnants of Earth's orbit, the enemy's dread weapons stirred at a monstrous artificial world crafted solely for annihilation. A silent behemoth, its surface a labyrinth of jagged metal, pulsing engines, and deadly arrays of weaponry, designed not for life, but for death. This was the World Killer, a grim herald of finality, the last card played by a galaxy certain that humanity's flickering light was about to be snuffed out forever. Its arrival was announced not by fanfare, but by a creeping shadow that swallowed stars in its path, a darkness that chilled even the most battle-hardened commanders. Entire fleets halted in uneasy silence, watching as this colossus approached, a city-sized weapon of destruction, born from nightmares and relentless ambition. Back on the battered planet below, she felt it before the alarms even sounded, a tremor in the ground, a cold shadow falling across the land. The World Killer was coming, not as an enemy to be faced with armies or tactics, but as a force that promised utter devastation. It was designed to erase, to cleanse by fire and steel, to crush all hope beneath its iron heel. The sky darkened with its arrival, a night that swallowed the sun and left only the cold gleam of machinery and the distant roar of engines. Cities held their breath, soldiers tightened grips on weapons, and the few remaining hearts of humanity braced for the final reckoning. But she did not flinch. Alone, scarred, and weary, she stepped into the storm, her figure a solitary defiance against the vast shadow looming above. Her eyes burned with a fire untouched by fear, reflecting the burning horizon where the World Killer's silhouette blotted out the stars. No reinforcements came, no cries of "hold the line." There was only here the last hope, standing against a weapon designed to end worlds. The ground trembled as the World Killer unleashed its flurry of beams of searing light that cleaved mountains, shockwaves that shattered the earth, and swarms of automated drones that scoured every corner for resistance. The air filled with the scent of burning metal and scorched earth, a cacophony of destruction that threatened to drown all hope. But she moved through the firestorm like a shadow, stepping over ruins and flames, her breath steady amid the chaos. Every step was a testament to defiance, every heartbeat a drum of resistance. Her body, bruised and broken, refused to yield as the World Killer's wrath rained down. Amidst the inferno, she found the command center, a tangled fortress of steel and circuits, pulsing with the cold logic of death. With hands that trembled only with resolve, she breached its defenses, navigating through corridors of fire and collapsing metal. There, in the heart of destruction, she faced the World Killer's Korea, a monstrous machine of unyielding power, humming with the promise of oblivion. It was the enemy's final message, a declaration that resistance was futile. But she was not finished. With the silent scream, she unleashed every ounce of strength left within, sabotaging circuits, igniting explosions that echoed through the metallic belly of the beast. Her body screamed in pain, skin blistering, muscles torn, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. The World Killer faltered, systems collapsing like dominoes, its deadly gaze flickering and dying. And in that blazing crucible, she stood victorious, not as a queen or a soldier, but as the last beacon of humanity's unbreakable will. The world had not ended, it had just begun. The air was thick with smoke, choking and heavy, as if the very atmosphere mourned the devastation unleashed upon the broken world. Flames licked hungrily at the jagged ruins, turning the night into a hellscape of roaring fire and shattered stone. The sky above was a canvas smeared with ash and sparks, a turbulent sea of orange and black, casting flickering shadows that danced like lost souls on the edge of oblivion. The ground beneath her feet cracked and hissed, scorching heat rising in waves that threatened to consume everything in their path. She stood at the edge of this inferno, a solitary figure carved from pain and unyielding will. Her body was battered, skin scorched and raw, muscles trembling beneath the weight of exhaustion and wounds that ran deeper than flesh. Yet her eyes burned with an unwavering fire, the fierce light of a soul that refused to be broken. Every breath she drew was a battle against the searing heat clawing at her lungs, every step a defiance against the consuming blaze that sought to swallow her whole. Around her, the world burned a symphony of destruction and despair. Buildings crumbled into ash, their skeletal frames collapsing into the firestorm, while the distant wails of the dying echoed like a mournful chorus. The scent of burning metal and flesh mingled with the acrid smoke, a brutal reminder of the cost of war and the price of survival. But she did not falter. She did not hesitate. With deliberate purpose, she stepped forward into the heart of the fire, the flames curling around her like serpents, relentless and unforgiving. The heat was a living thing, pressing against her skin, whispering threats of oblivion. Yet, she walked on, each step a testament to the resilience etched deep within her bones. Her breath came in ragged gasps, but her pace never slowed. The fire was a trial, a crucible that burned away weakness and left only the core of unbreakable spirit. Her mind flickered through memories of faces of those she had lost, promises broken and kept, the endless nights of fear and hope entwined. The pain in her body was a dull roar beneath the roar of the flames, a companion she refused to acknowledge fully. She was walking not just through fire, but through the echoes of a world that had tried to break her. In the distance, the enemy's forces converged, their figures silhouetted against the inferno, weapons raised, eyes wide with disbelief and fury. They had expected her to fall before the storm, to be consumed by the chaos she now embraced. But here she was, a defiant, relentless, and bold. As she drew closer to her target, a command post blazing like a beacon of destruction at her body screamed in protest, wounds burning, muscles seizing. Yet she pushed forward. The fire was no longer just around her, it was within her, a fierce furnace that tempered her will and forged her into something beyond mortal. With the final surge of strength, she crossed the threshold into the heart of the enemy's lair. The heat was suffocating, walls melting, circuits sparking, the very air crackling with the fury of battle. Her hands moved with practiced precision, striking at controls, severing connections, igniting explosions that shook the ground and shattered the silence. The enemy commander, a towering figure of steel and malice, appeared amidst the chaos, eyes blazing with rage and disbelief. Their gazes locked at two forces bound by hatred and respect. Without words, a silent war raged between them, a clash of wills more potent than any weapon. She advanced steadily, each movement measured and unrelenting, until with a swift strike she brought the commander down. The silence that followed more deafening than any explosion. The firestorm outside seemed to pause, as if the world itself acknowledged the weight of that moment. Bloodied and broken, she emerged from the flame as a phoenix reborn from the ashes of destruction. The battle was not over, but the enemy's heart had been pierced. Her defiance had become a beacon for those still willing to fight, a symbol that even in the face of annihilation, humanity's spirit would not be extinguished. And as the fire died down, the stars above glimmered with a cold light, bearing witness to the unyielding will of one woman who walked through fire and lived to challenge the darkness anew. The night had settled over the shattered remnants of a world long torn by war, but her eyes saw those windows to a soul tempered by unimaginable loss and unyielding hope. He held the weight of more than just the present. They bore the reflections of billions, an entire species etched into their depths. In those depths swirled memories, dreams, pain, and unspoken stories, an entire civilization's essence concentrated into the fierce light that burned behind her gaze. As she stood alone amidst the ruins, the silence around her was thick, almost reverent, as if the very air held its breath, unwilling to disturb the profound presence before it. Her eyes seemed to pierce the veil of night itself, seeing not only the scarred earth beneath her feet but the countless lives that had shaped the path she walked. Each soul was a whisper in the shadows, a flicker of light in the darkness, a heartbeat she carried within. The journey to this moment had been carved through fire and blood, through loss so profound it could have shattered the strongest of wills. Yet, she remained unbroken, a vessel for the collective will of humanity, a living testament to their survival against all odds. Her gaze was not just a reflection of herself but a mirror to the myriad faces of those who had fallen, those who still fought, and those who dared to dream of a future beyond the ashes. Her mind drifted to the earliest days of the collapse, when hope was still a fragile ember flickering in the gathering darkness. She remembered the faces of children who had never known peace, their eyes wide with fear and wonder, clinging to the stories of a world that once was. She recalled the silent prayers of mothers whose arms bore the scars of loss, and the resolute defiance of warriors who stood firm even as the stars themselves seemed to fall from the sky. Within her eyes, those countless souls intertwined a tapestry of pain and resilience, despair and determination. The weight of billions was not a burden but a force, a relentless current that propelled her forward even when her own strength faltered. Every glance she cast was charged with the memories of those voices, urging her to endure, to fight, to be more than a single life. The battlefield around her was a shattered mosaic of flame and ruin, but within her gaze lay the unity of a fractured species. She carried their stories, their hopes, and their silent pleas, a symphony of souls harmonizing in the stillness. The eyes that met the enemies were not merely human, they were the collective will of a civilization refusing to be erased. Her breath caught as the weight of this truth pressed against her heart. The enemy sought to break her spirit, to extinguish the light she carried, but they could not grasp the depth of what she embodied. She was not alone and never alone. The legacy of billions coursed through her veins, a silent army marching with every heartbeat. In the quiet moments between battles, when the world seemed poised on the edge of oblivion, she found strength in this connection. The eyes behind her eyes were endless, a vast ocean of souls that defied extinction. They whispered to her in the wind, sang to her in the night, and stood guard in the shadows. And as the stars watched silently above, she understood that her fight was never hers alone. It was the fight of every life that had come before and every life yet to come. In those eyes burned a promise: humanity would endure, not because of weapons or fleets, but because within them lived a fire that no darkness could conquer. The souls behind her eyes were a legion, an unbreakable force woven into the fabric of her being. And as long as that fire burned, the galaxy would know that humanity was still alive, still fighting, still dreaming, still waiting to rise again. The silence that followed her victory was profound, deeper than any battlefield stillness or lull in the storm. It was a silence charged with meaning, an echo of what had been and a portent of what was yet to come. She stood alone in the twilight, the smoldering ruins around her bathed in the last fading light of a dying sun. The air was heavy with ash and the scent of scorched earth, but beneath it all thrummed a pulse, faint but steady, like the heartbeat of a world refusing to surrender. She was not a leader in the way history would remember, not a queen adorned with crowns or a soldier commanding legions. She carried no title, bore no banner. Instead, she was something far more elusive, a warning. In her eyes lay the weight of countless battles, the grief of billions, and the unwavering defiance of a species on the brink of extinction. She was the silent storm before the tempest, the shadow cast long before the dawn. Where others sought victory, she embodied endurance. Where armies crumbled, she stood unbroken. Her voice, when it came, was soft yet carried the force of a breaking wave. "I was never meant to lead," she said, words deliberate and heavy, but to remind those who would seek to destroy us that humanity is not so easily broken. The galaxy had believed they could extinguish the light of mankind, that humanity's spirit was a flicker easily snuffed out. They were wrong, for she had become the embodiment of that spirit, a living testament that no empire, no weapon, no shadow could erase what had been forged in the fires of countless sacrifices. Her presence was a message, a warning sent across the stars, not just to enemies who sought to conquer, but to all who would stand witness. Humanity's story was not yet finished. Behind her eyes burned the souls of billions, a constellation of memories and hopes, a legacy that no dark force could claim. She was the quiet defiance, the last echo, the warning cry that now echoed through the cosmos. And as the stars shimmered coldly above, the galaxy knew this truth: she was not a leader, not a queen, but the pulse of humanity's undying heart, the warning that the fight was far from over. The end was just another beginning.